Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Speaking of which, Arlong's height was 2 meters 64, while Krieg was only 2 meters 43. There was indeed a noticeable gap of 20 centimeters, equivalent to human in confrontation. Stinky small fry, it seems I need to teach you what kind of attitude you should use when speaking to noble human. Because of his innate monstrous strength, Krieg had lived a life where he only bullied others, and others dared not bare their teeth at him, ever since he was born. Moreover, his personality was a combination of arrogance, ruthlessness, and baseness. If Arlong still had some affection and loyalty towards his own race, then Krieg was truly vicious at heart. At this moment, his gaze towards Arlong was also narrowed, with a sinister cold light flashing within. He knew that his strength probably wasn't enough to defeat this fishman, but to kill a human, you don't actually need to be strong than them. You. Just as Arlong was about to say something else, he heard Beckman, who was holding a cigarette, exhale a puff of smoke and gave a warning in a deep voice. Shut up. Be careful of trouble coming from your mouth. Meanwhile, Yusuf just stood there with his sniper gun, not saying a word. Huh? Arlong was so angry he laughed. Alright, he hadn't read that player manual at all, because in his heart, after mastering advanced fishman karate, most human couldn't be his opponent. As for that small portion, they were all in the world government's military. Suddenly, Arlong attacked without warning. He clenched his massive fist and smashed it towards Krieg's head. The next second, a muffled thud sounded. Arlong's head was struck by something so fast it was impossible to see clearly. The entire human flew out like a cannonball, then slammed heavily into the ship railing on the other side, unable to get up for a long time. Beckman, with a cigarette in his mouth, held the gun barrel of a pistol in one hand and said indifferently, I gave you a warning, be careful of trouble coming from your mouth. If there's a next time, 4 human can participate on our side. It turned out he had hit Arlong with the gun stock just now, but his speed was so fast that Krieg didn't see anything at all. Only Yusuf and Mekko, who had already awakening observation haki, clearly felt it. So strong. Mekko stared at Beckman with her small mouth agape in astonishment, thinking to herself. There was no haki aura just now, so he completely relied on his own strength to send that fishman tribe member flying? She felt even more awe towards this world. It was truly terrifying that any human you randomly pulled at was this strong. Chapter 518, You Are Actually Weaklings. As the first match between Squad 1 and Squad 2 began, more and more of the internal situation on Icefire Island was revealed to everyone. The audience could control the viewpoint on the virtual screen by operating the keyboard on the back of the visual Den Mushi. They could either lock onto a single person or split the view of 10 people into smaller screen feeds to display simultaneously. It must be said, transponder snails are truly miraculous creatures in the sea star world that couldn't be more black. The key is that they only need grass and leaves to survive. At this moment, Squad 12, composed of 5 Hashira from the Demon Slayer Corps, like most people, locked their viewpoint onto Squad 2, especially Chu, who was a member of the Fishman tribe. They were seen arriving inside the ice castle on Iceberg's side, bringing only their weapons and items as per the rules. The space inside was very large, and the ground and walls were all made of ice, making them appear somewhat translucent and sparkling. However, Chu and the others' attention was focused on the 5 iron plating boxes placed on the ground, and the 5 transponder snails dressed in winter clothes sitting on top of the boxes. Food, fresh water, medicine, clothing, map. Kyojiro Rengoku read out the text on the boxes via the screen feed, then said. So that's it. This castle is essentially a supply station? Jitamiya nodded. According to the rules, opposing members are not allowed to attack or enter the castle, so it's the only safe zone on the island. Although there are also small amounts of food, fresh water, and medicine in the gun turrets, they are allowed to be attacked and invaded. However, each gun turret has a self-destruct button inside. As long as the opposing side successfully enters and presses the button, it's equivalent to destroying the gun turret. Muchero Taquito smiled gently. Ever since his memory recovered, he particularly liked to smile, and his interactions with others were refreshing. That's a very good rule. After all, not everyone has the ability to destroy those metal gun turrets that are over 10 meters tall. Moreover, the main body of the cannon is hidden inside the top of the tower, so it's not easy to directly take out the cannon itself. Obanayaguro, Sanmai Shinazugawa, and others nodded in agreement. After all, destruction power has never been the sole standard for strength. It depends on a person's comprehensive skill in all aspects. Someone who can destroy a gun turret could very well be defeated by someone who cannot. For example, Hashira like them, when it comes to destruction power, are truly not as good as some of the former 12 Kizuki, but they still have ways to decapitation them into ash. Clearly, the world government understands this point, which is why they set up such a self-destruct button. Soon. In the screen feed, Squad 1 and Squad 2 began their operation. Their choices were practically identical, spreading out the 5 people within their squad. One person was responsible for each of the 3 main roads and the jungles on both sides. Because although the area of Icefire Island is far from being as large as the previous selection Trial Island, it is still comparable to a city. If the jungles are unguarded, the opposing side could very likely bypass from here to get behind them and first take out the gun turrets in the rear. However, honestly, without observation hockey, it's not realistic for one person to guard the entire forest. But no matter what, someone still has to be sent. What do you think? In Squad 5, Yusuf looked at Ben Beckman. Although the two had only recently met and came from different sea areas, they inexplicably got along well. Meanwhile, Arlong sat to the side, bruised and swollen, enduring Krieg's mocking gaze. No matter how he gritted his teeth or clenched his webbed fists tightly, he didn't dare to cause any trouble. Because he was still thinking of becoming one of the top 100 and showcasing the excellent bloodline of the Fishman tribe. Also, he really couldn't defeat this human named Ben Beckman. It was truly infuriating. Actually, we could completely abandon one side of the jungle and have 2 people team up to first take out one of the opposing members guarding the jungle, or a member on one of the opposing main roads, ensuring a local advantage in numbers. Compared to dismantling towers, targeting people is easier. However, in the end, you need someone with strong perception ability. Ben Beckman spoke his thoughts while thinking. He found the Icefire Island organized by the world government to be very interesting. Powerhouses have their way of playing, and weaklings also have their way of playing. The latter can actually completely avoid directly confronting the former. Even if a strong team of 5 groups up to push one main road forcefully, a weak team can split up to push the gun turrets on the other 2 paths. However, if the power difference between the 2 sides is too large, then there's nothing more to say. After all, this isn't a real game, there's no such thing as balance. It's enough just to save the lives of the weaklings. How could they further pursue so-called fairness? Yusuf smiled. I can be responsible for that. Although his observation hockey had only recently undergone awakening, its range was not small. At least perceiving a section of the jungle would definitely not be a problem. Ben Beckman nodded. When the time comes, you'll join the operation with me. Then the 3 of us will be responsible for guarding the gun turrets on the main roads? Mekko said softly. Correct. Ben Beckman looked at Mekko, Krieg, and Arlong. Ignoring Arlong's sour expression, he naturally gave orders. Mekko, you not only have observation hockey, but also possess the fear energy bullet, a technique with great power. You'll be responsible for the middle main road and see if you can directly destroy the opposing side's gun turret. Okay. Mekko had no opinion. She was used to following orders and was too lazy to be a leader. Furthermore, although Ben Beckman had not yet left the South Blue and hadn't experienced those adventures and combat, through self-realization, he had already mastered the basic application of armament hockey, which is coding. Coupled with his body talent, he was far stronger than Krieg. The latter's so-called monstrous strength was only considered average in the former's eyes. As for other things, like combat talent, tactics wisdom, and so on, that goes without saying. Krieg, and Arlong, you 2 are responsible for the upper and lower paths. Remember, just guard the very first gun turret in front. Even if the opposing members bypass you and destroy the gun turrets in the rear, don't worry about it. Because once you choose to leave and rush to the gun turrets behind, the opposing members confronting you can completely destroy the first gun turret as well. Ben Beckman truly didn't trust these 2's wisdom, so he could only break down these simple principles and explain them. Or rather, he didn't have much confidence in the wisdom of most people in the world. Humphrey, just directly kill the opposing members. Arlong snorted coldly. However, his appearance and tone highlighted a hint of stubbornness. Although Krieg didn't speak, his expression showed he also somewhat agreed with Arlong's words. Ben Beckman didn't refute, smiling. If you really have that skill, you can do that, just don't get killed by the other side. That's right. Yusuf also spoke up, showing no mercy to the two of them. These 400 people now are all powerhouses who stood out from tens of thousands of experts. There are many devil fruit users and hockey masters among them. The two of you are actually considered weaklings. Chapter 519, I'll make you a big pair of wings. Over the next week, the Sea Star world, Kabanrai world, and Demon Slayer world were almost completely engulfed in the fervent atmosphere of watching the multiverse combat power competition. Even the Eldian on Paradise Island in the Titan world, who were required to perform extensive labor, treated this competition as their biggest entertainment, finding significant relaxation, at least in spirit. And Levi Ackerman became a household name among all Eldian. Everyone was looking forward to his performance in the future, and it could be said that he had become a superstar in the hearts of the Eldian. In fact, Levi already had considerable fame on Paradise Island, and now even the Eldian who came from Marley recognized him. This time, the name Dwarf Giant had completely spread. However, some people were conflicted because Levi was from the Ackerman clan and not an Eldian. They hoped that one day a true Eldian could be active on the big stage of the world. This kind of psychology was actually very complex. On one hand, they hated the oppression and slavery from the Sea Star world, yet deep down, they desired the labor period to end soon and to fully integrate under the rule of the world government. This also led some Eldian to start cursing Ran Yeager, believing he shouldn't have blown up and killed an army general of the world government. Now look, he implicated all of them. What a bastard. The great crime of the Eldian. Meanwhile, the world government found that the originally set 3-day limit seemed to be too generous. Because for the 4 matches so far, let alone 3 days, none even lasted 2 days. This was because both sides had high confidence in themselves. So they didn't bother with complex plans. They either scattered into 5 one-on-one fights or grouped together for a decisive battle in the middle lane. This way, the competition would end quickly. There was even one match where not a single gun turret was lost. Therefore, the other World Strategy Committee is considering changing the time limit for each rematch in the next session to 2 days, or 48 hours. Yes. Squad 5, which included Beckman and Yusuf, had already finished their match. And they were the team that won by directly defeating all opponents without even touching a single gun turret because their opponent was too weak. Yusuf and Beckman's jungle duo was simply too bug, coupled with the opposing team of 5 having no hockey masters. Although there was one zone ability user, they couldn't withstand Yusuf's ultra-precise sniping from several kilometers away. While he couldn't kill, hitting the limbs and joints was no problem. Even if someone approached, they would be smashed to the ground by Beckman swinging his gun. This also made the whole world remember Yusuf, while Beckman was overlooked because his combat style was too simple. In comparison, Meko's heroic appearance after entering the new form was more popular. Especially the scene where she used Fear Energy Bullet to roar the opposing member she was laning against in the middle, along with the gun turret behind them, left a deep memory in countless people. It was just unfortunate that not only did the person not die, but the gun turret was also unharmed. The former was saved by a sudden pale green whirlwind, while the latter endured the roar by relying on its own tough defense. This also let everyone know that the world government truly had the ability to ensure that every participant facing a fatal crisis could receive timely protection. At the same time, they were shocked by the sturdiness of the gun turret. Facing a Fear Energy Bullet powerful enough to penetrate and destroy an entire street, it only suffered a relatively noticeable dent and tiny cracks on its surface. It looked like it could probably take 3 to 4 more Fear Energy Bullet. As a result, the remaining squad gave up the idea of using some kind of long-range sniping means to take out the cannon. Now it seemed that to destroy a gun turret, without sufficiently strong, high-power attacks, one would have to infiltrate or sneak into the gun turret's interior and press the self-destruct button inside. In the Titan world, the massive Noah's Ark still floated in the green space of the Door Fruit model, Dimensional Gate Devil Fruit. It's finally starting. Waiting is really annoying. Im sat on a lounge chair, looking at a large-size virtual screen in midair, sighing with emotion in his heart. At this moment, he had come to the 4th floor to watch the upcoming 5th rematch. Mainly because this 4th floor, as a botanical garden, had the most green plants and fresh air, making it the most suitable environment for leisure and relaxation. Historia still sat beside him, accompanying him, while Stussy and the 4 Yubuyashiki sisters stood behind, waiting for orders. Further away, the Kuja guards were responsible for standing guard. In addition, Im specifically called Enel over. Enel also brought the Humandrels and Kung Fu Dugong with him. The 3 of them had become particularly close friends. As for the Cloud Fox from Sky Island, Historia held it in her arms, gently stroking it. Regarding this, Stussy felt quite resentful in her heart. Because she used to be the one who held the Cloud Fox, but now it had been taken by this Queen Lord. However, she also knew that whether it was a cloud fox, the kung fu dugong, or any animals on this ark, they all belonged to Lord Amu. Therefore, Historia, as the queen, naturally had more right to enjoy the cloud fox's softness and cuteness than she did. Enel, you're 17 now, right? Im watched the screen feed of Ms. Nkibutsuji and others disembarking from the warship and heading towards the black stone castle near the volcano, while softly asking Enel, who was sitting on a chair to his left. Enel was one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Of course, he had the right to sit in front of him, but he needed Im's permission to sit, rather than just sitting down upon seeing a chair. And although Stasi was equivalent to the Secretary General, she could only stand behind. These kinds of rules, even though Im was a transmigrator, he valued them greatly and believed from the bottom of his heart that they were necessary. Otherwise, wouldn't his subordinates fall into chaos? Yes, Lord Amu. Enel sat lightly on the chair, lowering his head and answering respectfully. To him, the person before him was the true god of the world, and he himself was the other party's god's envoy. He firmly believed in these two identities and the relationship between them. Im calmly instructed, "Okay, then next year you will report to the Air Force headquarters. Before that, strengthen your hockey even more." "Yes." Enel responded loudly with excitement. Although the Noah's Ark was like a divine realm from myth, after living there for a long time, he had gotten used to it. He now hoped even more to serve as a 7 warlords of the sea, monitoring every move of the Air Force headquarters for Lord Amu, while also completing any divine oracle issued by Lord Amu. Lord Amu, I have a small request." Im looked over in confusion, surprised that the other party would proactively make a request, but still nodded, signaling him to speak. "It's like this, I feel that as your god's envoy, I should be different from ordinary Sky Islanders. So I hope to change the pair of small wings behind me into larger white feather wings." Enel stand up and pointed to the small wings on his back. These wings of the Sky Islanders were actually detachable decorations. The large black feather wings of the Lunarian race were the ones that grew from their body. "Oh?" Im raised an eyebrow, imagining Enel's appearance with large wings in his mind. He had to admit, wouldn't that be the spitting image of a great angel? Right. It should be Thunder Angel. If he stood with King, they would be a pair. This made him consider whether to also recruit King as his 7 warlords of the seas. But after thinking about it, he decided against it. Having one person watching the Air Force side was enough. "Alright, have the Academy of Science make you a large pair of wings." "Thank you, Lord Amu." Chapter 520, A Fierce Battle Unfolds. Rolling, towering icebergs connected layer upon layer, like 2 brilliant silver crystal crowns, centered around the ice castle, extending along the island's edge towards the east and west. Until they met the wide central Great River in the central area. On the opposite side of the river was a scorched magma zone with streaks of fire patterns, and further back, one could clearly see volcanoes erupting with rolling magma. The icy cold wind and the high-temperature heat wave, like 2 armies of opposing nations refusing to yield, constantly clashed together endlessly, forming a surging gale over the river's surface. Looking down at the entire island from above, one could clearly see that the only passages to the island were the docks behind the castles at both ends. To enter or exit from other directions, one would have to face the extreme cold on the icebergs or the magma on the volcanoes. Even following the Great River towards either side would result in being assaulted by gales and huge waves. The strange thing, however, was that the area around the 3 large stone bridges connecting the 2 zones was unexpectedly calm and peaceful. 6 tall metal turret, like silent giant, were positioned on both sides of the Great River at the forefront of the upper lane, mid lane, and lower lane main roads, lined up and silently facing each other across the great bridges. Within the snow-covered forests and the dry forests on both sides, the trees, whether straight or twisted, stood ready like soldiers. They were constantly preparing to provide assistance to their own warrior or block dangerous attacks. Every corner, every detail inside the court showed no sign of being newly built. Instead, it was filled with an eternal, epic aura. Ice Fire Island. It was destined to become a major iconic characteristic of the Sea Star world, and as the combat power competition was held session after session, it would surely become a stage yearned for by powerhouse from the multiverse. Hiss. It's so cold. It's even colder than I imagined. Luckily, I warmed up beforehand. Amidst the whistling cold wind, Tenjin Yuzui hugged his chest with both hands, sighing with some relief as he followed Mizen Kibutsuji and the others into the main gate of the ice castle. Mima Amatori nodded. Looking at the snowflake constantly drifting down from the dark clouds, he also felt a considerable chill. Indeed. But looking at the previous few matches, 5 sets of winter clothes have already been prepared inside. You just need to be careful. If they get damaged during combat, there's nowhere to replace them. Interestingly, these 2, who had a falling out during the previous selection trial because of Mekko, were now communicating quite naturally, as if nothing had happened. Because, in the end, they didn't really have any deep-seated hatred. At that time, Mima Amatori just didn't want Mekko to hinder his qualification, and Tenjin Uzui was just being meddlesome, not wanting a beauty to die in front of him. As for holding grudges, it can only be said that neither of them was the type to be narrow-minded or easily lose their heads. Now they had become objects of cooperation. Only a fool would haggle over trivial matter at this time, failing to understand the difference between primary and secondary matter. Levi, aren't you cold? Tenjin Uzui, being naturally friendly, turned his head to look at Levi Ackerman, who was walking at the back. Over the past few days, the five of them had become quite familiarized with each other, gaining some understanding of each other's identity, origins, and combat styles. Not cold. Levi surveyed the castle's internal environment with an expressionless face, giving a perfunctory reply. He, don't lie. You don't have any special ability or special constitution, so how could you not be cold? Tenjin Uzui teased, continuously exhaling wisps of white mist from his mouth. He then looked with an envious gaze at Mizen Kibutsuji and Morgan William, who were leading the way and had already started climbing the iced stairs. Their destination was the 5th floor, the top level, where the resource box and transponder snails were placed. William, can't you release a little steam to warm us up? I can, but it's not worth the gain. William explained gently as he walked up. Firstly, I need to conserve my stamina as much as possible right now. Secondly, even if I warm you up for a moment, you'll still have to face this severe temperature after we split up later. It's better to adapt to it early. Alright. Tenjin Uzui knew he had a point after hearing him and stopped insisting. At this moment, he heard Mizen Kibutsuji, who was at the very front, remind them in his neutral voice that was difficult to distinguish between male and female. We need to increase our speed. The opponents have already started distributing the contents of the box. Mima Amatori and the other three, including Tenjin Uzui, exchanged glances. Although they didn't say anything, they all silently quickened their pace up the stairs. Mizen Kibutsuji was their temporary captain. Not only because his strength was the greatest, but also because of his glint fruit ability. His far sight and X-ray vision with a radius of 4,000 kilometers, combined with transponder snail communication, could be said to be a very reliable core, completely sufficient to control the entire field and command the whole team. This made them feel even more amazed by the devil fruit ability, and it also strengthened Mima Amatori's resolve to apply for a Logia-type devil fruit after becoming one of the top 100. Soon, the five quickly reached the top floor. Without needing much communication, they first went over and took their own transponder snails. Then they opened all the tin box and took out some food, fresh water, medicine, and a map of Ice Fire Island. Among them, Tenjin Uzui, Mima Amatori, and Levi also took out a set of winter clothes that wouldn't hinder their movements but provided good warmth and put them on. As for Mizen Kibutsuji and Morgan William, they didn't need them at all. The latter was originally a steam person, while the former controlled his body temperature to be unafraid of the cold. His body was currently like a stuffy hot furnace. Mizen Kibutsuji saw that they were ready and immediately said, "Alright, next we'll proceed according to our previous plan. Tenjin Uzui, pay attention to calls." "Okay." Tenjin Uzui suppressed the slight awkwardness in his heart and replied to the other party while maintaining a calm mindset. Over the past few days, things weren't uneventful on the cruise ship. On a certain night, Mizen Kibutsuji specifically found his room and recounted everything he had previously said to Kyojiro Rengoku and Sanmai Shinazugawa, word for word. At the time, he was utterly shocked by Mizen Kibutsuji's audacious idea. He actually wanted them, including Yubuyashiki Oyakata, and the Demon Slayer people who would subsequently come to World, to pledge allegiance to him and form a so-called Demon Slayer group. And Mizen could help every Demon Slayer person enhance the total cell count of their body. He could also teach them life return in advance, and these were just the initial benefits. In the future, as long as it was a high-grade resource he obtained through his relatively high identity in the world government, he could share it as appropriate, improving their strength as much as possible. His goal was for all the Demon Slayer people to use this influence to gain a firm foothold in the world government and world. At the same time, they should be prepared to compete with influence from other worlds. To be honest, Tenjin Uzui's rationality told him this was a plan that was beneficial to him and all the Demon Slayer people without any harm. Except that it was psychologically difficult to accept. No matter what, Mizen Kibutsuji was someone they had previously sworn to kill. Which person from the Demon Slayer Corps didn't have a deep-seated hatred for demons? But the problem was that Mizen was no longer a demon. Moreover, with his current position within the world government, they were not allowed to continue attacking him. Torn, he had no choice but to take out his transponder snail and call Yubuyashiki Oyakata, who was far away on Wano Island. But who knew that the latter had already heard about this matter from Kyojuro Rengoku? And Yubuyashiki Oyakata's reply was for him to first focus on dealing with the combat power competition with peace of mind. After it ended, he would invite Mizen Kibutsuji and the former Hashira of the Demon Slayer court to gather at his manor. Since that was the case, Tenjin Uzui habitually left this matter for Kageya Yubuyashiki to make a decision on. Swish, the next moment. Except for Tenjin Uzui. The other four, without a word, turned into streaks of afterimage and leaped out of the ice castle's window at extremely high speed. Then they scattered towards the upper lane, mid lane, lower lane, and the eastern snow forest. Through the surveillance Tendenmashi placed in various corners and the airship's aerial view, the countless audience members from the four worlds watching the live broadcast could clearly see how they split up. Among them, Mizen Kibutsuji was on the mid-lane main road. Morgan William was on the upper lane main road, and Mima Amatori was on the lower lane main road. The last one, Levi Ackerman, had already begun using his enhanced omnidirectional mobility gear at his waist. He moved like lightning through the forest where the branches and leaves were covered with snow. Only Tenjin Uzui, after jumping down from the fifth-floor window of the castle, was slowly walking towards the mid-lane at a leisurely pace. Just as he stood below the second gun turret, the transponder snail in his pocket started calling out. He picked it up casually and answered, seeing it imitate Mizen Kibutsuji's appearance and tone. At the same time, William, Mima, and Levi were also holding their transponder snails and listening silently. The opponents haven't made any special position changes, it's the most common 5 in a line. On the upper lane is that bounty hunter, Jin Engo. Be careful of his sniping. Also, although the manual doesn't say he can use hockey, it doesn't mean he definitely can't. Don't forget he comes from the New World, where hockey is most common. Listening to Mizen Kibutsuji's soft instructions, William smiled and said, "Thanks for the reminder." However, his heart was not as relaxed as it seemed on the surface. After all, the terror of a sniper who might have hockey had been fully demonstrated by Yusuf from Squad 5 earlier. Of course. If the opponent didn't have hockey, then his element's transformation would be invincible and very easy to deal with. Okay, the opponent on the lower lane is the Octopus Fishman tribe member named Hickey. I believe Mima, you've already seen the related information, so I won't say more. In short, fight if you can win, and prioritize preserving yourself if you can't. Leave it to me. Mima Amatori had already arrived near the second gun turret on the lower lane. He gave a slight smile to the transponder snail in his hand. His handsome face, filled with noble bearing, attracted many young female audience members. Then there's Levi, your opponent is the Lion Mink tribe member named Sicilian. As expected, it's him. Levi arrived near the central Great River and stopped behind a tree trunk with dense branches and leaves, carefully observing the commotion ahead. Although there wasn't much information about the Mink tribe in that manual. It only said that this Sicilian had displayed outstanding swordsmanship, extremely high agility, and exceptional adaptability to the jungle environment during the previous selection trial. But just in the past few days, Mima Amatori, who had previously spent some time at the army headquarters, had already shared the special abilities of the Mink tribe. Since Levi was also most skilled in jungle combat, he had long anticipated that he would encounter the opponent. After all, no matter how you looked at it, both sides were jungle-type players. To put it simply, he's a humanoid lion who can use electro to enhance his physical ability and also uses a sword. Levi Ackerman muttered inwardly in his heart. When he was in the Titan world, he had multiple epithets such as dwarf giant, humanity's strongest soldier, and one person's combat power is equivalent to a 400-man brigade. And now, in another world, he would face an expert from another race, which made his narrowed, sharp eyes reveal a look of anticipation. Tenjin, that ability user named Dorothy has gone from the underground towards the second gun turret on the upper lane. Intercept him. When it was his turn, Tenjin Uzui saw Mizen Kibutsuji use a tone that was almost an order, and the corner of his mouth twitched subconsciously. It was obvious that this guy already regarded him as a subordinate. But in the current situation, it wasn't suitable to dwell on such matter. After sighing inwardly in his heart, he replied. Got it. Immediately, without another word, he violently pushed aside the snowflake in the air. Accompanied by the whistling cold wind, he turned into a black afterimage at an astonishing speed and rushed towards the upper lane. So your opponent on the mid lane is the swordsman named Buddha. According to the manual's description, he has not only mastered 2 colors of hockey but is also a genuine true sword master. He should be the strongest among their 5 members, so you need to be careful. Morgan William said with a light chuckle, looking at the first gun turret on the upper lane that was close at hand. The reason he used true sword master to describe him was because he already knew that although the Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps could unleash sword wind like the sword master of this world, Their swordsmanship realm had not reached the level of steel cutting, and the range of their sword wind was actually not very large. It's alright, it's not like I can die anyway. Mizan Kibutsuji looked at the figure holding a blade on the other side of the stone bridge. His tone of reply seemed very nonchalant. Ever since he learned that killing was not allowed in this rematch and that there was an ability to protect participants in time, his mindset had become less cautious. Moreover, on the way here, he had hidden a piece of flesh and blood the size of a fist inside the ice castle, which was not allowed to be attacked. He was afraid that if something unexpected happened later, he might be killed by the opponent and leave no corpse behind. He could also transfer his consciousness there and undergo flesh and blood rebirth. So, there was really nothing for him to be afraid of. He even suspected that the reason the world government temporarily added a rule prohibiting killing might be to protect him from danger. After all, he was so important now. Meanwhile, Tenjin Yuzui, the current Jonin of Sea Ninja Village, was holding his black and gold Nichiren blade. He had crossed the snowy ground forest on the upper lane and arrived near the second gun turret. Next, he concealed his aura as much as possible, hiding behind a tree trunk and scanned the surroundings. At the same time, he tilted his right ear, listening carefully for something. There. Tenjin Yuzui targeted a spot on the snowy ground 20 meters away and charged out rapidly. With the two special Nichiren blade in his hands, connected by an iron chain, he swung down without hesitation. Sound breathing, first form, roar. The moment the golden yellow blade pierced the snowy soil, accompanied by a huge sound, a violent explosion occurred. Immediately, large amounts of soil mixed with ice and snow splattered outwards. At the same time, intense sound waves spread out within the ground layer for dozens of meters around. Every inch of accumulated snow. Chapter 521, can see the movements of either side. William transformed into a mass of white-hot steam, cautiously sweeping slowly over the stone bridge. The gun turret on the opposite bank seemed to be keeping a close eye on his every move. However, what William was concerned about was not this seemingly tall and imposing metal gun turret, but the empty, withered forest surrounding it. Swish, as expected, just as the steam stepped onto the scorched ground, a high-speed spinning axe flew from the right side behind the gun turret. Just by hearing the sharp whistling sound, one could tell its speed was very fast. Although William didn't have observation hockey, he was highly focused and was able to react in time, quickly dispersing his steam. Bang! The flying axe passed through the steam and landed heavily on the surface of the stone bridge, blasting open the stones in that zone like a bomb. A large amount of gravel flew out like bullets, even affecting William's body ahead, passing straight through his body. Looking closely again, the axe blade had deeply embedded itself inside the stone bridge, with only the wooden handle sticking vertically out of the ground. This showed how terrifying its power was. That guy, he really has armament hockey. William's heart sank. He immediately retreated without hesitation. He knew that without observation hockey, the risk of continuing forward while being sniped by the opponent's various weapons was too great. This was also why he didn't fly over the river on either side. Otherwise, if he were shot down, he would likely have to face the surging river. One must know that this was the upper lane for him, essentially one of the estuaries. Fortunately, the opponent seemed to have only mastered armament hockey. Otherwise, he definitely wouldn't have been able to avoid that last attack. Swish. Swish, that bounty hunter who had recently gained some notoriety on the Grand Line clearly didn't intend to let him go just like that. A cutlass and a long sword were thrown out again, just as fast and accurate, and coated with a layer of armament hockey invisible to the naked eye. But the steam William had transformed into was too ethereal and flexible, sometimes dispersing, sometimes drifting, allowing him to dodge them one by one without much danger. Jean Engo, hidden behind the gun turret, could only watch helplessly as the steam flew back to the opposite bank. The main reason was that he didn't carry many weapons this time. The Marines only allowed carrying the number of weapons one could carry on their person. So he could only hold 2 in each hand, and then tie or wrap around 10 various cold weapons on his back, chest, and waist. For example, short axes, chain hammers, throwing knives, javelins, etc. Overall, the quantity was still too small. Although he could definitely find a way to recover them after throwing them, such opportunities were certainly few, so he had to conserve them. With this limitation, Morgan William and Jean Engo could only remain in a stalemate across the Great Bridge and the river. In fact, since the latter knew armament hockey, he could have charged forward with a weapon in hand. But the problem was that as a professional sniper, he instinctively preferred throwing as his primary combat means. Hence the saying, people generally don't choose the most rational way to act, but the way that makes them feel most comfortable. This has nothing to do with IQ, only habit. Lower lane. Mima Amatori was fiercely fighting Hiki, who was over 40 centimeters taller than him, on the stone bridge with his long sword coated with a layer of Kabinari heart membrane. The latter's 6 arms, 6 long sabers, coupled with the Fishman tribe's innate powerful wrist strength and stamina, meant that every 6-sword-style sword technique he unleashed was quite powerful against the former. Although the former had enhanced his total cell count, his physique had only reached the level of ordinary sea-star people. In terms of raw physical strength alone, he couldn't compare with Hiki, who was a Fishman tribe member. But everyone knew that combat was never just about who is stronger. Mima Amatori had not only mastered instant transmission and tempest kick from the 6 powers, but had also initially grasped armament hockey and observation hockey. His swordsmanship, derived from serpent breathing, was also excellent. Furthermore, with his various experiences and insights from the army headquarters, he didn't take ordinary Fishman tribe members like Hiki, who were merely stronger, seriously at all. So, he was actually suppressing Hiki with slashes throughout the entire fight. Even when the opponent's gun turret fired at him, Mima Amatori could casually cut the cannonball in half with a single blade. This was something he couldn't have imagined doing in the past. Through this combat, Mima Amatori could more clearly feel that he had indeed become much, much stronger. He was no longer an ordinary person, but a true transcendent. If he had his current strength back then, why would he have needed to endure for over a decade and go through so much trouble to scheme various operations? He would have just killed his way into Konigakaku alone with a single blade. It's not enough, I need to become stronger, step by step, to become one of the higher-ups of the world government and a powerhouse at the pyramid peak. The determination in Mima Amatori's gaze grew stronger. The blood in his body boiled under the burning of ambition, and the blade he swung became sharper and more powerful. This guy's gaze is so scary, yo. Amidst a series of clanging sounds and surrounding blade light and sword shadows, Hiki noticed a heart-palpitating red glow flash in Mima Amatori's pupil as he swept his gaze over. He also noticed that he was already coiled in the center by a giant white python, and the snake head above him was already flicking its red tongue, eager to strike. This guy from the other world is a snake, a poisonous snake, yo. This filled Hiki with fear, and he no longer dared to hold back. He immediately unleashed his full strength, thinking of first breaking free from Mima Amatori's entanglement and then temporarily retreating. Watch my 6-sword-style secret technique, 6-sword waltz. In an instant, this Fishman tribe member with pink skin, 6 arms, and an octopus face, actually turned into a high-speed rotating blade storm. Even the surrounding air current was stirred up, forming a tornado of energy capable of shattering the stone bridge. This scene truly astonished Mima Amatori. If not for the protection of armament hockey and the perception of observation hockey, he might have already suffered serious injuries and been forcibly dragged into the tornado by the violent energy. Mima Amatori narrowed his eyes, staring at the blade storm that seemed to have given up on one tower and was rapidly sweeping towards the deeper area. He felt that the power of Hiki's move was slightly stronger than the storm unleashed by Seinmei Shinazugawa from the army headquarters. Indeed, none of the contestants who can stand out from the selection trial are weaklings. However, the most watched combat of this match by the audience from the 4 worlds was neither William, the Logia user, nor Mima Amatori's fight, nor even Tenjin Yuzui playing whack-a-mole all over the place. It was the battle between Mizan Kibutsuji and the sword master named Gitten on the mid-lane main road. Their combat had completely destroyed the stone bridge over the river. The two were engaged in the most tragic fierce battle entirely on the ruins piled with stones and the surging waves of the river. Several flesh whips coated with hockey danced wildly in the air at supersonic speed, clashing head-on with the various blade lights and slashes unleashed by Gota, completely enveloping in the court with rapid, deafening loud noises. Many audience members' naked eyes could no longer see the movements of either side. They only felt countless blurry afterimages and roaring filling every corner of the virtual screen. Chapter 522, Blitz Reform and Reorganization Plan for the Army. The popularity of the Myriad Worlds Combat Power Tournament was, of course, extremely high. Although due to a lack of experience, the first session encountered various problems, overall, it successfully made a name for itself and proved its worth. From here on, they just needed to proceed step by step. In comparison, the higher-ups of the Other World Strategy Committee and the military were actually more concerned about the matter of the Summit War. These big shots were greatly looking forward to the challenge results of Aramaki and the newly appeared Isho. First, let's talk about Aramaki. Everyone knows he is a Logia System forest fruit ability user, and according to the records in the Devil Fruit Encyclopedia, the forest fruit is also an upper-tier fruit. However, his current true combat power is truly not well understood. Although he had a relatively impressive performance in the previous Titan world, merely massacring a group of other world soldiers who only held firearms but whose physical ability was even worse than a child's is truly not convincing. Overall, the military of the world government holds a certain discriminatory mindset towards the 3 other worlders so far, believing that if they didn't have firearms, they couldn't even defeat a 10-year-old child from this world in hand-to-hand combat. Of course, this is indeed a cruel fact. And this time, Armaki voluntarily applied to challenge the Summit War, which is indeed a good opportunity to perform in front of the big shots. What he wants is very simple: high position and authority. He wants to become an admiral. As for Isho, he is completely an unexpected surprise. If there really is one more person with admiral-level combat power or admiral potential, then the big shots of the three forces will have to contend. Who wouldn't want one more high-level combatant under their command? However, Sengoku, Raiman, and even Zephyr also understand that even if Isho truly has this strength, which military branch he is specifically assigned to still depends on his ability type and the intention of the 5 elders above. It's just that the Summit War has to wait for the Myriad Worlds Combat Power Tournament to end before it can begin, therefore these military big shots still invest their energy into some important matters. As for the Myriad Worlds Combat Power Tournament, they occasionally take a look or instruct their subordinates to pay attention for them, to see if there are any suitable talent for their side. If not, then so be it, because they also know that the contestants who can participate in this competition are basically all unruly and untamed individuals who are unwilling to join the military and unwilling to be restrained. In this way, they become chicken ribs for the military. Then what are they busy with? Actually, it's mainly the army headquarters that is busy with reorganization and reform. They feel that the current army system cannot adapt to the war of conquest of the other world. And the proposer is precisely Douglas Bullitt. He believes that in most situations where the Stargate passages are narrow, there is absolutely no need to deploy hundreds of thousands, or even millions, of large troops for every war. Therefore, a few days after Bullitt returned to the Army headquarters from the Titan world, he formally submitted the reform plan to Marshal Raymond in the name of Army Admiral candidate. Its main content is that he hopes the Army headquarters can implement elite training and reorganization, and also carry out reform for the existing military structure. Firstly, Bullitt believes that the soldiers of the Army headquarters should significantly reduce their practice with firearms, only needing to be able to basically use them, while at the same time significantly increasing their training time for martial arts and swordsmanship. As for those who are indeed talented in the aspect of shooting, they should be transferred to Cypher Paul. Because he feels that whether using firearms, or using bow and arrow or other methods to perform long-range sniping, they all actually belong to the means of the assassination domain. As for the Army side's long-range attack method, it should be using cannon to perform saturation bombing. At the same time, Bullitt wants to divide the Army unit into 2 parts. One is the main battle force responsible for external conquest, and one is the garrison force responsible for staying in the homeland, which are the so-called front-line force and second-line force. Among them, the troop numbers of one division of the main battle force should be around 10,000 people. Then 5 divisions form one legion. There should be 3 such main battle legions, which can be just right to be handed over to 3 admirals to be responsible for commanding. As for the following 15 divisions, they should be handed over to 15 elite vice-admirals. Slightly weaker vice-admirals should serve as the commander of a brigade, and the regimental-level troops below that will naturally be rear-admirals. As for those below Commodore, Bullitt doesn't even bother to mention them. That is to say, in Bullitt's thinking, having 150,000 main battle force in the entire Army headquarters is enough. The remaining troops are all left in the homeland to serve as garrison force, or sent to those already conquered worlds to be responsible for garrison missions. At the same time, they should train desperately to serve as the reserves for the main battle force. Then what if they encounter a hostile civilization with massive military strength? Very simple. Bullitt proposed to organize people from the other world into an aid force, and then equip them with a large amount of firearms and tanks. Once there is a need for large-scale military strength, they should be called over to share the pressure in terms of numbers. As for the soldiers of the main battle force, they only need to carry blades or gauntlets crafted mainly from gorilla sand iron ore, gorilla scarlet iron ore, Kabanrai heart membrane, black gold bamboo, and even sea stone as the main material. Then equip themselves with the latest results from the Biochemical Research Institute, the Kabane combat suit, jet pistol, Yuzui high-explosive grenade, and 1 heavy motorcycle installed with the McClatchy mechanism is enough for transportation. This is a type of black technology originating from the Kabanrai world, where even water can be highly compressed to serve as power source. With slight renovation, it can also use ice-burst stone, this more powerful energy. At the same time, also prepare inside the heavy motorcycle these types of small yet highly functional items: purple butterfly emergency pill, gourmet plant seed, anime I-10 antidote pill, mangrove bubble seed, and transponder snail. In this way, a relatively complete army main battle soldier is formed. This type of soldier can persevere no matter what environment they are in. Moreover, Bullet also suggested trying to equip every squad at the basic level with one Kibinari warrior in new form. This will greatly enhance the main battle force's demolition capability and other aspects special means. Basically, a 10-person squad troops, as long as they can infiltrate the enemy's rear, is enough to cause immense destruction and chaos. It should be known that the blood inside a Kibinari warrior's body also carries the Kibinari virus. As long as operated properly, they can completely create a large number of Kibinari world in a short time, and these Kibinari world will be affected by news order and will not threaten their own soldiers. If the quantity is large enough, it can also allow Nu to gather them together at any time and turn into terrifying black mist. It must be said that Douglas Bullet is treating every soldier of the main battle force as omnipotent special warriors to be forged and trained. He even explicitly stated in the plan, every single main battle soldier should at least be a first lieutenant, or rather, when a garrison soldier is selected into the main battle force, regardless of whether he was previously a private first class or a sergeant, he should automatically be given the military rank and treatment of a first lieutenant. Furthermore, this requirement should increase with the continuous improvement of the whole army's overall strength, until one day, all 150,000 members of the main battle force are qualified to wear the Code of Justice. Only at that time can it be considered to have reached the level of the true main battle force in his heart. As for even more future matters, Bullet doesn't know. And this plan report of his naturally received the attention and importance of the entire higher-ups of the world government. And now, the army headquarters is busy to the point of being overwhelmed with this matter, which has also caused a huge uproar among the entire army from top to bottom. Chapter 523, Better to Destroy It. Recently, it wasn't just the army headquarters that was busy, it could be said that all departments of the world government were operating at overload. There were simply too many things currently underway and being prepared. For example, the first batch of 9 battleships, built by the shipbuilding artisans from the Demon Slayer world and Titan world under the supervision of the Industrial Division, using the Yamato as a template, have been officially completed and launched. They are now discussing the handover date with the Marine headquarters. The reason for using the Yamato was primarily because its hull, internal space, and cannon caliber were large enough, and its armor thick enough. While conforming to the aesthetic preferences of the Marines, it also met their needs. However, it wasn't a complete copy of the Yamato. Subsystems like fire control and targeting have been replaced with the systems from the USS Iowa battleship. Additionally, the steam turbines have been replaced with the more powerful special high-pressure steam engine from the Kibinari world, the McClatchy mechanism. The cannonballs have also been changed to high-explosive jet shells. This is a product that combines the jet bullet technology from the Kibinari world with the high-explosive from the Uzui family in the Demon Slayer world. The Uzui family's hereditary explosives allow small explosive pellets less than 3 centimeters in diameter to possess power comparable to high-explosive grenades. When they reach the volume of a grenade, they can produce power comparable to a cannonball, capable of blowing up a 2-story building without issue. Now, the Industrial Division has applied this more powerful explosive to the cannonballs of marine ship cannons, further enhancing the jet bullet's muzzle speed, attack range, penetration power, and impact force. Once these cannonballs are fired, they quickly transform into a stream of liquid metal like magma in midair. Essentially, very few physical defenses can withstand being penetrated. Furthermore, the Industrial Department is also responsible for building aerospace carriers and fighter aircraft for the Air Force headquarters and arranging professionals to teach Air Force soldiers how to operate them. The aerospace carrier is essentially a drawing of an aircraft carrier that M provided to his subordinates. In fact, this concept isn't very difficult. The first aircraft carrier in history was actually created by removing the gun turrets from a battleship to free up the runway for airplanes to take off and land. So, he only needed to provide this concept and then inform them of the requirements for the aerospace carrier. The professionals below would naturally be responsible for perfecting and realizing it. However, M specifically requested that not too many of these aerospace carriers and fighter aircraft be built. 3 large aerospace carriers, each equipped with 150 to 200 fighter aircraft, should be sufficient for a few years. This is because he has realized that as more and more stargates are opened, they will definitely come into contact with better technology in the future, and it's even possible to acquire a spaceship someday. In that case, these aircraft will definitely not be used for long, so building too many would be a waste. At the same time, the world government also needs to organize millions of laborers from the Demon Slayer world to carry out large-scale construction projects on the Canberra continent, Australia, in the Titan world. The most urgent task is to first construct the biochemical safety station for disinfection, the frontline hospital, soldier barracks, and the first layer of surrounding defensive works. For this, the world government has already transferred Baikla and Teach there. At this time, a large number of army garrison forces and heavy cannons must also be deployed there. Various food, fresh water, medicine, ammunition, and other supplies must also be prepared. Because everyone knows that a new Stargate will definitely appear in another 6 months, next year, time is quite tight. And these are just the military matters. In fact, the world government has never relaxed its work progress in terms of livelihood. This is because him and the 5 elders, who know the future, are very concerned about this. Although there are still 2 years until the next reverie, making it impossible to make significant changes at the legal level. However, relying on the prestige accumulated by the world government over the past 1,000 years, it is still possible to do some things that are not entirely in line with the law. For example, providing humanitarian aid in terms of food, medicine, and clothing to some truly impoverished kingdoms and town islands, while also guiding and helping the local people build their own houses, and other necessities. Just like the Goa Kingdom and the East Blue. The administrative department, accompanied by department officials and under the guard of the Marines, has already semi-forcibly required the royalty of that kingdom to cooperate with the renovation of the so-called Grey Terminal. Furthermore, the economists and economists from the finance department are still providing planning schemes for those kingdoms that lack specialty products, based on the characteristics of their islands. If the poverty is caused by the heavenly tribute, they will also apply to the celestial tribute collection and management committee for these kingdoms to have their heavenly tribute halved or exempted for the next few years. While these various deeds do not have a strong sense of presence for the world government as an entity, as most people's gaze is focused on the Stargates and other worlds. However, for the numerous citizens who have personally experienced various forms of help and care, and whose living conditions have indeed undergone earth-shattering changes, it is enough to fill them with goodwill and gratitude towards the world government. This also provides the best citizen support base for the police station that were subsequently stationed in various countries and various islands. In fact, in some places, people's trust in the police is much deeper than their trust in their own king and nobility. As soon as they encounter a matter, they immediately go to the police station to seek help. This also makes the kings and nobility in these places feel both depressed and annoyed, yet helpless, forcing them to restrain some of their less visible behaviors. This is because there has already been a case where a noble from a certain kingdom was arrested by the police for persecuting civilians. In fact, this does not comply with the current laws and regulations, but the no king or noble dares to confront the world government in court. However, once the next reverie is convened, this matter will naturally become legal and compliant. That is, the citizens of each affiliated country and the citizens of various islands are also citizens of the world government. The world government has the obligations and authority to guarantee the personal safety, personal dignity, judicial fairness, and basic living conditions of all citizens. This is one of the agenda items drafted by the Political Affairs Department. For this, the judiciary at NI's lobby is also collaborating with legal experts from the whole world to re-optimize and improve the current world government laws. However, they also know that no matter what, celestial dragons cannot be involved, so no one will ever mention the word celestial dragon. Because matters concerning celestial dragons can only be resolved by the celestial dragons themselves. This is the world government's bottom line. Anyone who dares to touch it will die. This is also Im's intention. He can confine most celestial dragons. But he will never allow their status to waver in the slightest, because he is the king of the celestial dragons, and even their god. The more consolidated the celestial dragon class is, the stronger his control over the world government will be. If one day the world government is no longer under his control, then he might as well just destroy it. What use would it be? Chapter 524, Making the Celestial Dragons Give Up What They Want? However busy the subordinates were, it didn't affect him. He was still in the lush, vibrant Arc 4th layer, watching the battle between Squad 5 and Squad 6 on Ice Fire Island. But Im's main viewpoint wasn't focused on Mizunkibutsuji and the sword master named Buddha. Firstly, their battle scene wasn't very interesting. Secondly, the outcome had already been decided, because Gatu had no means to counter Mizen's self-healing ability. Coupled with Mizen's nearly inexhaustible stamina, his result could only be defeat. It was just a matter of how quickly. By comparison, Im was more interested in the battle between Levi and Sicilian. He remembered this Sicilian, wasn't he the musketeer team captain in the cannon's future, a humanoid lion with crimson hair? He truly couldn't tell who would win or lose between these two. Neither of them had mastered hockey. Their competition was purely based on their swordsmanship, strength, speed, reaction, and combat experience. On the large virtual screen floating in midair, a green whirlwind and a red lightning streaked at high speed through the cold jungle where snowflakes danced, colliding, crossing paths, and colliding again. Under the control of their respective masters, the sword wind and sword light unleashed by 2 half-blade swords and 1 rapier transformed into surging gales and dazzling electric flashes clashing together. Wherever they went, the clanging sounds were incessant, and the trees along the way were cut down piece by piece, collapsing. To be honest, Levi, who was currently fighting, felt incredibly exhilarated. Since he enhanced his total cell count and learned wind breathing, this was the first time he had encountered an evenly matched opponent. It was exhilarating. This kind of combat felt very different from hunting pure titans before. The latter felt more like simply cutting meat to him, while now they were competing in their respective combat techniques. This Ming tribe member named Sicilian, although much younger than him, possessed beast-like physical ability, perception, and the racial talent to enhance his body with electro, all of which were quite tricky and difficult to deal with. I heard that the Mink tribe also has a transformation ability called Zulong. I really want to see it, but unfortunately, it's not night. While controlling the omnidirectional mobility gear at his waist to shuttle at high speed between trees, Levi used various sword techniques from wind breathing to unleash green hotai or whirlwinds. He suddenly felt that the appearance of the world government didn't seem to be entirely a bad thing. He seemed to like his current life more. Compared to the Titan world, the Sea Star world was clearly a bigger stage. He could experience novel matters almost every day, and he could also feel himself constantly becoming stronger every day. Such an exciting life was truly fascinating. And for the audience from the four worlds watching this match, it was a feast for the eyes. This was the most wonderful and intense battle they had ever seen so far. Crucially, the characters on the field were incredibly varied, not only gathering 3 experts from other worlds but also minority races from the Sea Star mainland, and even Logia users and sword masters. Every single one of these elements was so rare that even many Sea Star people felt their perspectives were greatly broadened. Wano Island. Since the world government abolished the name of Wano country, this island with a long history in the Sea Star world has been changing rapidly, and it has undergone considerable changes by now. Firstly, aside from the flower capital, the other 5 regions have all built flat airports of varying sizes. This is because the terrain of Wano Island itself and the harsh climate around it make it difficult to transport supplies and personnel by conventional sea ships. Therefore, the world government has always used flying warships, which requires proper airports to park these flying warships. Secondly, the population on the island has increased. This is mainly from 2 sources. One is the majority of Demon Slayer Corps members. Some of them obtained their own houses and farmland and became the most ordinary lower-class citizens. Those with sword talent mostly continued to cultivate swordsmanship at the Sword Pavilion. It is worth mentioning that the current pavilion master of the Sword Pavilion is Mihawk. Due to his love for swordsmanship, he spends more time at the Sword Pavilion than at the Shogun Castle. This is because there are a large number of ancient sword technique manuals collected from the Odin family and several daimyo's homes, as well as various diagrams of strange sword techniques collected from various places in the world. Jian is also a sword fanatic, and naturally, she is willing to accompany him to observe and research together. Wano Island has already used the propaganda department's channels to send out invitation letters to well-known sword masters in various places, roughly stating that if they truly love swordsmanship, they should join the Sword Pavilion and climb towards the peak of swordsmanship together. A small portion of the people were taken in by the Sea Ninja Village. However, some mid to high-level officials of the world government didn't quite understand the purpose of these ninjas. In their view, the ninjas' purpose overlapped with CP, and it would be better to merge the ninjas into CP. But when some submitted suggestions were rejected without any reason given, no one brought it up again. They just assumed that the big shots above simply liked watching those ninjas' performances. At the same time, Yudon has now become an area slightly more lively than the flower capital, because it has the largest Sake iron ore vein and sea stone ore vein, and it has also been the smelting center of Wano Island for 1,000 years. Let's put it this way, almost all sea starmdo originate from this place. And in recent years, the world government has brought the swordsmiths belonging to Kongakaku in the Kabanrai world, the Nichiren swordsmiths belonging to the Demon Slayer Corps in the Demon Slayer world. Also, the swordsmiths responsible for forging half-blade swords belonging to Paradis Island in the Titan world and the swordsmiths from the eastern country have all been brought here. This has formed the currently quite large-scale famous sword town. Their main mission recently is to forge weapons for the main battle force currently being selected by the army headquarters. At the same time, they are researching how to make a blade that is both as light and agile as a half-blade sword, and also has the toughness and sharpness of a sharp sword, while also possessing the niche iron blade sonora and the effect of the blade heating up with grip strength. If it could also be mixed with some sea stone component to make it even sturdier, and also have a restraint effect on ability users, that would be even better. Flower capital. In the manner belonging to the Yubuyashiki family, Kageya Yubuyashiki looked at Mizen Kibutsuji, who was displaying astonishing combat power on the virtual screen, with complex feelings. His wife, Jingwamon, and his son, Yubuyashiki Kiriya, sat silently by his side. It seems I should make a decision. Amon and Giriya understood their husband's meaning. Kageyubu Yashiki had not hidden Ms. Kibutsuji's proposed idea of an alliance from them, as it was simply impossible to hide. However, to pledge allegiance to the demon progenitor, who had brought the family nearly 1,000 years of painful curse, was truly a very difficult inner gulf to cross. Ms. Kibutsuji is right. Only by banding together can we gain a firm foothold in this world, and only then can we become stronger and increasingly valued by the world government. A pained expression appeared in Kageyubu Yashiki's eyes, and he sighed in a low voice. If we had enough influence, we wouldn't have been easily taken away by those people, Hingaki and the others. They were still so young. At that time, the world government demanded that his 4 young daughters be given to an extremely noble celestial dragon to be maids. He was actually very unwilling. But facing that official who claimed to be from the Grand Steward Institute's Holy Affairs Department, Kageyubu Yashiki ultimately didn't dare to say the word refuse. He could only endure the pain in his heart, and expressionlessly sent his daughters away. Because he understood very clearly what a terrifying existence the celestial dragons were. If he had truly refused, he didn't dare to believe what would happen next. But the question is, how much influence does one need to make the celestial dragons give up what they want? Chapter 525, What a pity, what a pity. Inside the Fleet Admiral's office in Manaford, Sengoku looked at the pile of documents on his desk, only 10 centimeters thick, and let out a long, helpless sigh. He didn't know when it started, but the matters he needed to handle personally had become fewer and fewer. In the past, he was often buried in mountains of documents. Even with the little sheep beside him trying its best to eat, the desk was always piled high with nearly a meter of documents. Back then, Sengoku felt very tired, wondering how long he would have to live like this. But now, truly idle, his mood had instead become complex and sad, and he felt even more worried and concerned about the future of the Marines. The main reason was that the Marines' participation and importance in other world conquest were too low, directly leading to them being increasingly disregarded by the world government. After all, most stargates were small, making it impossible for their warships to easily sail through. Furthermore, unless they encountered another world where most areas were covered by ocean, like their own world. Otherwise, the Marines would never be able to compete with the Army, or even the Air Force, for the main combat authority. What did that make them? Third-line troops. What was most frustrating was that the world government kept drawing resources from the Marines for the Army and Air Force, and even gave the judiciary the function of issuing bounties and arresting land criminals. Although the Marines had just received 9 brand new battleships recently, Sengoku would rather exchange them for Sakazuki and Borsellino. But he also knew that was an impossible matter. The only reason Kuzan remained was because his ability was indeed more suitable for the Marines. Otherwise, the higher-ups would definitely have transferred Kuzan to the Army as well. And Garp, this old man's combat style was actually also suitable for the Army, but thankfully he had been a Marine his entire life and directly refused the proposal from the world government. While involuntarily thinking about these annoying matters, Sengoku manipulated the buttons on the back of the visual Den Mushi, projecting the virtual screen into the air. Soon, the screen feed of the ongoing First Myriad Worlds Combat Power Tournament stage came into view. This was a rare form of entertainment recently. Even as the Fleet Admiral of the Marines, he would occasionally watch it to relax his mood. Oh? Is it the Demon Slayer Corps match right now? Sengoku raised an eyebrow as he watched Jitomiyuka, Miyochiro Takido, Kyojiro Rengoku, Sanmai Shinazugawa, and Oban Iaguro fighting fiercely on Ice Fire Island. Because this Squad 12 was entirely composed of former Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps, they were jokingly referred to as the Demon Slayer Corps by the audience who understood their background. Among them, the people he was most familiarized with were naturally Jitomiyuka and Miyochiro Takido. These two were first transferred to Marine headquarters to teach water breathing and mist breathing to Marine soldiers. Later, the higher-ups felt that mist breathing was more suitable for assassination, so they transferred the latter to Cypher Paul. As for Jitomiyuka, he was now a headquarters lieutenant commander at Marine headquarters. Thanks to him, water breathing had been completely popularized within the Marines. Basically, from private upwards, they had to practice this peculiar cultivation method that could both unleash swordsmanship like flowing water and briefly enhance physical ability. In particular, it was also discovered that it could make it easier for people to understand and master life return, which greatly increased its value in the military. What are those markings on their faces? Tattoos? Just as Sengoku took out Senbai from his drawer and was about to notify someone outside to bring him a cup of hot tea, he noticed that Jitomiyuka, who was in an intense battle with his opponent, had several wave-like blue patterns on his left cheek. Furthermore, whether it was their sword-swinging speed, movement speed, or evasion speed, it clearly exceeded the standard of a headquarters lieutenant commander. As mentioned before, As more and more people within the military practiced breathing style, the advantage of the Demon Slayer Corps' Hashira in this regard became less and less. There were already quite a few captains and first lieutenants whose strength was on par with these majors. But now, Sengoku could see that the combat power of Jitomyuka and the other four had reached the level of a headquarters colonel. Their swordsmanship had also clearly begun to grasp the steel-cutting realm of a swordmaster. The most direct manifestation was that the power and range of the sword when they released had become stronger and larger. This also indirectly indicated that their physical ability had also seen some enhancement. Previously, these Hashira were unable to reach the level of sword masters in this world primarily because their physical ability was too weak. Of course. Except for Tenjin Uzui, whose total cell count had been enhanced. Observation Haki? Sengoku also noticed that Muichiro Takido's movements clearly had a feeling of subtlety, which he saw as the use of observation Haki. However, their opponents, Squad 11, were clearly not weak either. Two of them could use armament Haki, one could use observation Haki, and one was a zone ability user. Judging from the tattered clothing and varying degrees of bloodstains on Jitomyuka and the four others, it was clear they had gone through a difficult exchange earlier. But now, they were fighting back and forth with their opponents. Also, the niche iron blades in the hands of these few people, with their red blades emitting a faint gunfire flash, warped the air along their path with every swing. One could tell the temperature was quite high just by looking. Sengoku recognized this as a crimson blade at a glance. They, the military higher-ups, had known for a long time that the temperature of the niche iron blade would increase with grip strength. He and Garp had even personally tried it before. The result was that the niche iron blade burst into flame, emitting a faint golden light with a bang. This phenomenon had long surpassed the description of merely being red hot. Later, they heard that the world government called this type of niche iron blade a blazing blade, which was a higher level form than the crimson blade. However, the blazing blade seemed to be the limit of the niche iron blade. Because after some testing out of curiosity, basically vice admirals or some power-type rear admirals could also make the niche iron blade burst into flame by gripping it. That guy Garp even crushed the sword hilt of a niche iron blade into powder trying to see if he could force out more flame. So their physical ability has been comprehensively enhanced? Sengoku examined the faces of Jitomyuka and the others, guessing in his heart that it might be related to these suddenly appearing markings. It seemed he would have to find some time to ask them when they returned. Bang, pew ha ha ha, Sengoku, we've found another good prospect. That Isho alone easily defeated Momonga, Gomil, Onigamo, and the others. Suddenly, the office door was pushed open and slammed against the wall beside it, clearly broken again. Behind Garp was a colonel with a troubled expression. Go find someone to fix the door. Sengoku's original copy expression turned angry, just about to give this old man bastard a good scolding, but he was attracted by Garp's words. He immediately suppressed his displeasure and gave the order to the colonel. Yes, sir. Garp, seeing that he had broken the door again, tilted his head back and laughed heartily without any sincerity. I accidentally used too much strength, ha 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 ha. Alright, tell me about Isho. How is his strength? Is there a possibility he can stay with us? Sengoku asked helplessly, waving his hand. His strength is quite good. Although he is a bit weaker than that kid bullet, he definitely has the potential to reach admiral level. As for whether he can stay in the Marines, this old man thinks it's doubtful. Garp plopped down on the sofa, his expression becoming slightly serious. Without waiting for Sengoku to ask, he said directly, his ability is the Parimshia system's gravity fruit. He can not only suppress people with gravity but also use reverse gravity to make objects fly up, so. He made a you-know-what-I-mean pouting expression. Sengoku was speechless after hearing this, feeling even more mentally weary. If that was the case, he would most likely be transferred to the Air Force by the higher-ups. Ah! If only that Morgan William was willing to join the Marines, what a pity, what a pity. Chapter 526, A World Where Sword Masters Are Worse Than Dogs. Didn't expect the first person to awaken the Demon Slayer three-piece set of Demon Slayer Mark, Transparent World, and Crimson Blade to be Muichiro Takido. It must be said he's truly worthy of being a bloodline descendant of Yoriichi Tsujikuni. He is indeed a genius. Inside the fourth-floor botanical garden of Noah's Ark, Im saw the changes in Jitomyuka and the others and naturally recognized them immediately. Thinking carefully, he really hadn't revealed the matters of Demon Slayer Mark and Transparent World to his subordinates. After all, these two abilities are clearly exclusive bloodline talents of the Demon Slayer people and have nothing to do with him. However, this Demon Slayer Mark, although it can greatly enhance a person's combat power, can also cause other Demon Slayer swordsmen to develop the Demon Slayer Mark through resonance. But its side effect is also very terrifying. Except for people like Yoriichi Tsujikuni and Komodo Tanjiro who inherently possess the Demon Slayer mark, others cannot live past 25 years old after awakening it. Therefore, this is a passive ability that greatly consumes lifespan. In comparison, Transparent World is the truly good thing. It's equivalent to observation hockey with a smaller perception range but includes X-ray vision ability. Unfortunately, this thing cannot spread to others like the Demon Slayer mark. However, the problem of lifespan is not without a solution. Silently watched the combat on the virtual screen and pondered this matter in his heart. Right. The previous match involving Mizukibatsuji and the others was won by them without a doubt. There's nothing more to say about this, he had long expected it. The current Mizukibatsuji, except for people like Crocodile and Smoothie who have special attack abilities against moisture, is difficult for anyone below Admiral to deal with. Even one day, when his hockey quality improves, it's not impossible for him to reach Admiral level combat power. Although, given his current personality, this possibility is very low. Speaking of the Demon Slayer mark matter, the problem of lifespan generally has two possibilities. One is the consumption of life force, and the other is a rule-based curse. Just like the boys of the Yubuyashiki family, they have been weak and sickly for nearly 1,000 years. They not only slowly go blind and become disfigured with time, but are even so weak that laughing loudly causes them to vomit blood, and coughing causes bone fracture. But when Mizukibatsuji evolved into a perfect being, their body naturally recovered its health. This is the so-called curse. Similarly, before, when the curse was still present, using the future sight ability once a year was enough to make the men of the Yubuyashiki family lie in bed for over 2 months and would also exacerbate the degree of their body's deterioration. But now, although it's not that exaggerated, but after using it, they also become extremely tired, needing at least 1 or 2 weeks of time to recover from the weakness. After the medical academy's examination, it was determined that it was the result of a sudden large loss of mental power and life force. Fatigue was due to insufficient mental power, and weakness was due to insufficient life force. Regarding mental power, there is no way, one can only rely on rest, but there are multiple ways to replenish life force. First is enhancing their total cell count, which will improve their overall physique. Also, eating high-nutrition food daily, such as the meat of sea kings and so on, can also quickly recover life force. In addition to this, the purple butterfly emergency pill developed by Shinobu Kacho also has a certain effect. So in Im's view, regarding the lifespan problem of the Demon Slayer mark, it first needs to be determined what category it belongs to. If it's the former, then it's not worth mentioning, its value to the world government will be greatly reduced. But if it's the latter, then it's worth the world government giving it some importance. Why? As mentioned before, the Demon Slayer mark will, like a resonance, cause the Demon Slayer swordsman around the awakened user to awaken the Demon Slayer mark one after another. That means it can mass-produce Demon Slayer mark swordsmen. In this way, the value of the people from the Demon Slayer world naturally increased somewhat. It's just not yet certain whether only the foot basin chicken person in the second special zone can develop the Demon Slayer mark, or if everyone in that world can. Also, without undergoing specific experiment before, Im also dared not be certain if the Demon Slayer mark only resonates among Demon Slayer people. Is it possible that the medium is actually the breathing style? This is naturally the best result. If C-star people who learn the breathing style can also awaken the Demon Slayer mark, then it would be a lot of fun. It's just that the possibility is too low. Thinking of these things, Im didn't care about continuing to watch the match of Jitomiyuka, Miyoshiro Takedo, and the others. He immediately ordered Stussy to record what he was about to say and then convey it to the 5 elders to handle. Historia, who was beside him, felt more and more surprised the more she listened. She secretly thought in her heart. So the people of the Demon Slayer world also have bloodline talent similar to the power of the Titans? At this moment, her gaze suddenly looked towards Mikasa, who was standing behind her. Because she felt that compared to the power of the Titans, the Demon Slayer mark and Transparent World seemed more similar to the talent of the Ackerman clan. After Stussy left, Im continued to watch the Demon Slayer core match. For him, it was actually no different from watching anime. Mainly, the special effects of the breathing style were indeed very abundant. In the screen feed, there were flame, water flow, white mist, gale, white snake everywhere, and it looked quite beautiful. In fact, the combat scenes of these Hashira also indeed attracted countless audience members before the live broadcast. There were also some people who recognized Levi and Mima Amatori from the previous match, who were using precisely the sword techniques of Seinmai Shinazugawa and Obanayaguro. Only after listening to Stella's narration did they understand the relationship between the two. As for him, he suddenly had a whimsical idea. The widespread nature of the breathing style is so good, then is it possible to publicly release the cultivation method to the entire world? Imagine that scene, In the future world, anyone aspiring to become strong, even if they cannot enter a professional kendo dojo to learn swordsmanship for various reasons. They can also find the local police station or other related departments, request a copy of a breathing style and school sword technique suitable for themselves, and then relatively conveniently master a swordsmanship. What kind of effect will this produce? It will lead to an overall improvement in the war potential of the Sea-Star civilization. After 10+ years, it will truly become a terrifying world where swordsmen are everywhere and sword masters are worse than dogs. Any young people encountering a matter will be able to draw their blade and unleash wind, fire, thunder, water. As soon as Im thought of these things, his mood became filled with excitement. For him, every change in the Sea-Star world is so interesting, let alone a matter like the widespread adoption of breathing style, which will definitely cause big changes. Right, can the cultivation methods for armament hockey and observation hockey also be publicly released? Im's eyes lit up. He no longer had the mood to watch any anime, but instead started thinking about the possibility of doing this and the subsequent consequences. If the two colors of hockey can be publicly released, although they are not as easy to practice as the breathing style, they will also further enhance the war potential of the world. This seems like a good thing, but he was worried about whether it would cause too much upheaval in the entire society, or even affect the stable rule of the world government. Currently, hockey outside is mainly acquired through the self-realization of experts. They learn it while fighting during combat. Even if someone teaches it, it's one-on-one teaching due to various relationships. Even the previous Big Mom, Kaido, and Whitebeard didn't gather their subordinates and specifically teach them to master hockey. In the entire world, only the Marine Headquarters and Cypherpol would do this kind of matter. Let's not. Hockey can wait a bit longer. However, the breathing style can indeed be publicly released first. I'm still prepared to play it safe and first see the effect after the widespread adoption of the breathing style by the entire population. Chapter 527, Small Matters, Big Meetings, Big Matters, Small Meetings. Today is already the 5th of August in the year 1500 of the Marine calendar. This means that the first Myriad Worlds Combat Power Tournament, which began on July 1st, has been underway for 36 days. There are only 2 matches left before all participants' points can be tallied and ranked. This duration is actually much shorter than the Other World Strategy Committee's initial estimate. As mentioned before, the Other World Strategy Committee had allocated a 3-day limit for each match. Therefore, if all matches had gone the full time, it would have taken 120 days, or roughly 3 months. But who would have thought that these hotheads from the Sea-Star world wouldn't play any tricks? Even if they tried, they couldn't pull off anything fancy, resulting in the average time for each match being less than a day. Most squads went up, started fighting, and either quickly defeated their opponent or were quickly defeated themselves. The fastest match was decided in less than half an hour. This is why the Other World Strategy Committee is considering shortening the time limit to 2 days or even 1 day for the next tournament. However, even after these last 2 matches are finished, it doesn't mean the tournament stage is over. Because among the remaining 200 participants, there will inevitably be many with the same number of points. Firstly, if there are multiple participants with the same points as the 100th ranked participant, they will first need to undergo a one-on-one elimination round. This is very cruel, as all the effort put in by those who are defeated up to this point will be for naught. Of course, just when everyone was anticipating the list of participants who would enter the top 100 ranking match, an astonishing situation occurred in these last 2 matches. Perhaps influenced by the atmosphere of nervousness as the competition neared its end, internal conflict broke out among all 4 of these squads. According to the rules, winning a match means each person obtains 10 points. They also obtain additional private points based on the number of opposing participants they defeat. Although the losing side doesn't obtain 10 points, if someone defeats a participant from the winning team, they can also obtain corresponding points based on the number of people. This means that even among members of the same winning squad, some might obtain 15 points, while others might only obtain 10. The crucial point is that the rules only recognize the participant who delivers the decisive final blow as scoring the point. This created a lot of room for scheming and backstabbing. Actually, this kind of situation wasn't unheard of in the previous group stage matches, but it wasn't as blatant as in these last 2 matches. After all, they were competing under the gaze of countless audience. But now, they clearly didn't care about their reputation anymore, focused solely on obtaining more points than their teammates while still securing victory. As long as they became one of the top 100, what did it matter if they were looked down upon for a while? Finally, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on August 8th, all the tournament stage matches finally concluded. However, when the points ranking appeared before all the participants and audience, they found that there were simply too many people with the same score. Among the 200 participants from the winning squads, the highest score was 11 points, followed by 10 points. However, no one managed to get 15 points. It was clearly a very difficult achievement. At the very top of the points ranking, however, appeared a participant who got 14 points, and was the only one to do so. Squad 5, Yusuf. This was a somewhat unexpected result, but upon closer thought, it was quite reasonable. With Beckman providing guard throughout the match, Yusuf was able to use his wide-range observation hockey and unparalleled sniping ability without any worries, shooting through the joints of the limbs of the 4 participants from Squad 6. The remaining participant who tried to approach was knocked unconscious by Beckman using the butt of his rifle. However, this also resulted in Beckman only obtaining 11 points, while Mekko, Krieg, and Arlong all obtained 10 points. So next, everyone with 10 points will have to go through a series of elimination rounds to determine the final top 100, before proceeding to the final one-on-one ranking match. For the audience, being able to watch another month or so of matches was certainly a source of joy. As for the world government, they continued with their usual affairs. They only needed to wait for the results of the competition. In comparison, the military and political high command were more concerned with the discussion currently taking place in the political affairs department's meeting room. Because this involved major matters that would affect the whole world. At this moment, only Josh Lund, the dean of the Proclamation Government Institute, who had little to do with the agenda item, was absent. Clifford Gray, the dean of the Political Affairs Department, Smedley, the dean of the Judiciary, Gareth Merrick, the dean of the Supreme Military Command, and Belters, the dean of Cypher Pol Agent Headquarters, were all gathered together. In addition, Kong, the minister of the Command Department, Tsaru, the minister of the Staff Department, Zephyr, the minister of the Military and Political Department and Fleet Admiral of the Air Force, as well as Ryman, the Army Marshal, and Sengoku, the Fleet Admiral, were seated on either side of the meeting table. Although there were only 9 people present, as the saying goes, small matters have large meetings, large matters have small meetings. Generally speaking, the higher the rank of the matter, the fewer people participate in the discussion. Just like above these people are the 5 elders, and above the 5 elders, there is only alone. Regarding the matter of publicly disclosing and promoting the breathing style to the entire population, I believe everyone has already expressed their opinions. So, let's proceed with a vote by show of hands. Clifford Gray, as the master of the venue, scanned the people present with his gaze, speaking slowly in a calm tone. Now, please raise your hand if you agree to the public disclosure and promotion. As soon as he finished speaking, Gareth Merrick, the dean of the Supreme Military Command, Belters, the dean of Cypher Pol Agent Headquarters, Kong, the minister of the Command Department, as well as Ryman, the Army Marshal, and Sengoku, the Fleet Admiral, raised their hands. The result was now clear. Including Clifford Gray himself, 4 people opposed the public disclosure and promotion of the breathing style, but 5 people agreed. This caused the scene to fall into silence for a moment. Sigh. Zephyr sighed. This old man still believes that doing so will greatly increase the frequency and intensity of conflicts in the outside world. This will definitely cause turmoil throughout the entire world. In his opinion, the popularization of breathing style and accompanying sword techniques was far more serious than freedom to bear arms. Indeed, I've read the related information on the Demon Slayer Corps. Even 15 or 16-year-old child in their world can skillfully master breathing style and directly confront those man-eating demon. If it were in our world. Minister Tsuru's beautiful face, which only had a hint of wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, showed a worried expression. I think in a few years, we'll see a group of child around 10 years old holding blade and sword and using various sword techniques with wind, fire, thunder, and water special effects. Although the attack range won't be very large, it still seems too outrageous, doesn't it? Moreover, this is too dangerous for child. Many adults still don't understand the severity of things. Serious accidents are bound to happen between child. After she finished her lengthy speak, Gareth Merrick, the dean of the Supreme Military Command, spoke coldly. That is the judiciary's matter. The court and the Ministry of Police Affairs will be responsible for it. Everyone present should understand what a rare opportunity it is to improve the war potential of our entire civilization in this era of conquest of the multiverse. Other worlds don't even have this kind of opportunity. Tsuru stopped speaking, only furrowing her brows to express her persistent opposing attitude. However, she also understood that this matter had been decided, so she could only sigh in sorrow in her heart the tragedies that were about to happen in various places in the world. At this point, Sengoku, who had previously raised his hand to show support, put forward a suggestion. Should we legislate to prohibit child under 15 from practicing breathing style and using real sword? Chapter 528, Hardbone? Prepare more winter clothes? Time passed day by day. Every day, news of someone being eliminated could be heard. However, hadn't been watching the matches much recently. For one, the people he was paying attention to were basically confirmed to be able to advance to the top 100 ranking match. For another, he actually had quite a few matters on hand. Although he wasn't responsible for participating in the actual work of the world government, to control such a massive tissue, there were quite a few matters he needed to understand and documents he needed to read. Besides that, he also had to study medical arts, practice swordsmanship, develop life return, and think about and research more uses and mysteries of mental power. The first two were not worth mentioning. The latter two were mainly because he found that he had actually fallen into a thinking blind spot. He had always thought before that he should wait for the Stargate to open to a relatively high-level world before abilities or things useful to him would appear. For example, if he needed a cultivation method that could cultivate the soul, he would need to encounter worlds similar to Shaman King, Inuyasha, or Bleach. But this was actually a passive way of dealing with things. Recently, he had a sudden thought: could he continue to deeply explore the potential of life return and mental power? At least Mizan Kibutsuji had already proven that life return could be further developed. Then, just like developing devil fruit ability, relying on his current strength and the brain power of a transmigrator, perhaps he could come up with some interesting things himself. So yesterday, he also ordered someone to send over a Kabinari in new form, preparing to start by understanding their so-called fear mental energy. Lord Imu, this is the report sent by the 5 elders. Just as Im was chatting with Historia on the 5th floor of the Ark, Stussy appeared silently beside him and respectfully handed over a file bag. Im took it, took out the report and glanced at it. The next second, his gaze flickered as he thought to himself. Have they already decided to announce the news to the world after the summit war ends? This was actually the record of the speak from the previous meeting and the final determined plan. The reason Im wanted the military and political high command of the world government to discuss and decide by vote whether to announce the breathing style matter was mainly because he was also a bit unsure about this matter. And he had always believed in the principles of one person's wisdom is limited, many people's wisdom is long, and leave professional matters to professional people. So he let the elites below be responsible for thinking about the problems involved. However, since the result was already out, he didn't need to care about it anymore. He then put the report back into the file bag and returned it to Stussy. Immediately after, his cold gaze turned to Historia sitting beside him. In a few more months, I will open a new Stargate. Tell me the information about the next other world. Historia nodded obediently after hearing this. She then closed her eyes and sank her mind into the paths of the Eldian bloodline, preparing to view her future memory. Im waited patiently beside her, while the Yubuyashiki 4 sisters behind him looked at Historia curiously. They were naturally not unfamiliar with the ability of future sight. They all wondered, could this heavenly Queen Lord also have the same ability as father? As for Stussy, she felt more envy and a bit of jealousy. Historia opened her beautiful green pupil. However, her eyes were filled with confusion and incomprehension. At the same time, she looked at him with some nervousness and said in a low voice, "It's strange, I can only see future memory within this year." Im raised an eyebrow. What did that mean? He didn't understand for a moment. After his reaction, he said coldly, "Take me to see Mir." As soon as he finished speaking, his gaze fixed on Historia's eyes, preparing to let his consciousness follow hers, entering the coordinate space again through the paths. Because the heart voice reading ability let him know that this woman wasn't deceiving him, the problem must lie with Mir, who was the core of the power of the Titans. However, after the two looked at each other for a moment, although Historia's eyes showed a change of losing focus, Im's consciousness remained completely still. This made him realize that something was definitely wrong. Lord Imu, Mir she. When Historia opened her eyes again, she was very frightened and nervous. She then stand up, and then knelt halfway down onto the ground, her voice trembling greatly. She said she doesn't welcome you going to see her, and she won't let me communicate memory with my future self anymore. She just asked me to tell you that the next world is a hard bone, and to prepare more winter clothes. Roar. As soon as her voice fell, the entire Noah's Ark, suspended in the door space, began to shake violently under a sudden heavy pressure. The air on each floor also became distorted and blurry. Including Lord of the Sky Kukulkan on the Golden Belfry, 7 giant god soldiers wearing golden armor, tens of thousands of Holy Land garrison warriors, and 100 Cypher Pol elites. As well as Enel, who is practicing martial arts on the open ground outside, Stussy beside him, the Yubuyashiki 4 sisters, Mikasa, Kuja guards, and others, were all instantly pressed to the ground. Intense fear, like a tide, washed over their minds along with severe pain throughout their bodies. Naturally, Historia in front of him was the same. She even subconsciously used crystal to protect herself. At this moment, the woman's heart was filled with despair, thinking that she had been completely screwed over by Ymir this time. Were the Eldians about to be slaughtered? But this pressure, like divine power, came quickly and went quickly. Although everyone felt as if they had experienced years of suffering, it was actually only a few seconds. Fortunately, although Ym was angry, he still maintained his composure. No one was crushed to death by hockey. Ymir clearly didn't want to fully help the world government, but she also didn't completely refuse cooperation. She did indeed provide some future information. She was certain that he wouldn't be willing to part with the simulator-level future sight ability, and even less would he severely punish Historia because of this. After all, this woman could still control the rumbling. Also, Ymir also knew that he currently didn't have the ability to freely enter and exit the coordinate space. Before, it was purely because she allowed him to enter that it was so smooth. Furthermore, even if he could enter the coordinate space in the future, what could he do? Ymir herself had a mentality of seeking death. It must be said, Ym truly had no way to deal with this 1,000-year vengeful demon right now, and her future sight and the rumbling were indeed good things. He just didn't understand, how could the characters he encountered be more opinionated and individualistic than the last? Shouldn't he be the protagonist? The supporting characters in those fan fiction from his previous life weren't this difficult to deal with. But no matter what, since matters had developed to this point, Ym could only hold his nose and accept it. Once the Biochemical Research Institute makes progress in their research on the grotesque worm, perhaps the world will be able to have its own unique power of the Titans. You go back first. Also, talk to Ymir more and persuade her not to be too willful. If you can convince her to fully cooperate with us, I can greatly improve the treatment of the Eldians or shorten their labor term. Ym looked coldly at Historia, who was still kneeling on the ground. Her delicate body trembled, and she quickly replied with some surprise. Yes, this concubine will definitely make an effort to persuade Ymir. Go. Ym waved his hand. After Historia left, he looked at her retreating figure and thought to himself. Hardbone, does this mean the next world's combat power will be very strong? And prepare more winter clothes, does that mean the environment will be very cold? Chapter 529, we have no choice but to guard against it. Hardbone? Prepare more winter clothes? When these two keywords reached the eyes of the 5 elders on the Sea Star mainland, their initial thought was the same as Lorimu's. Since even Ymir calls it a hard bone, it means the next otherworld is stronger than a Titan world, or there exists something more difficult to deal with than her powerful future sight and the rumbling. Saint Topman Warcurry furrowed his brow and mused. Humphrey, this Ymir is truly audacious. Sooner or later, we will teach her a lesson. Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn let out a cold snort, his face full of displeasure. The others felt equally displeased. If only the other party cooperated properly, they could know all the intelligence about the next world in advance. They would only need to gather experts and elite from various fields to make targeted preparations and plan. In fact, not just the next world, but the one after that, and the one after that. But this Ymir clearly didn't want the world government to conquest the multiverse so easily. She directly unilaterally sealed this simulator-level cheat and then threw out 2 vague pieces of information to dismiss them. This is simply outrageous. Let's wait. The Biochemical Research Institute is currently cloning the grotesque worm captured from Ren. The Navy Fishman Special Forces led by Tate are also searching for other grotesque worms in the deep sea near Marley in the Titan world. Finding either of these could potentially allow us to possess our own power of the Titans and coordinate space. By then, we won't need to rely on Ymir anymore. St. Marcus Mars was still accustomed to standing beside the sofa because his legs were too long. With his hands in his trouser pocket, he spoke chilling words in a cold tone. But St. Shepherd Jupiter, sitting on a single sofa, bent his upper body, resting his arm on his thighs, and clasped his hands together in front of him, questioning back as if arguing. What if the cloning fails? Or what if the cloned thing doesn't have the ability to create a new founder Titan? Or what if the new grotesque worm found by the fishman also lacks this ability, and that grotesque worm is actually unique? He was the supreme leader of Cypher Paul and possessed a strong agent style. He would consider the worst possible outcome for any matter. St. Marcus Mars naturally knew this, so he didn't have any negative thoughts. He just shrugged his shoulder and replied indifferently. Then we can only find a way to communicate more with Ymir. Regardless, she and the Eldians are still under our control, aren't they? St. Topman Warcurry nodded, agreeing with his words. Indeed, as long as the things are in our hands, we will be able to use them eventually. Alright, let's talk about the specifics. Since prepare more winter clothes was mentioned, we can confirm that the next otherworld should have a severely cold climate. Let the subordinates start preparing measures for cold protection and anti-freezing. St. Jaga Ursha Saturn didn't want to talk about Ymir anymore and abruptly changed the subject. This only requires a single command. And even if the climate of the another world is excessively cold, we can have Borslino use his awakening to dispel all the wind and snow. This is not difficult for us to solve. We can also send Sakazuki there to melt the existing ice layer and accumulated snow with his magma, and then have Aramaki go to promote the growth of plants and trees, and absorb the melted water along the way. Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn and Saint Marcus Mars spoke one after another, describing the process of completely changing the climate and environment of a region as quite relaxed and simple. It sounded like only 3 people needed to be sent, although that was indeed the truth. Ahem, this old man's meaning is, we should understand the specific environment situation, which means a clearer screen feed. Otherwise, what's the use of just knowing that it's very cold over there? Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn looked at them speechlessly. Huh? Oh. The 4 were startled at first, then reacted one after another. Saint Topman Warcurry slapped his forehead and laughed. That's right, we have another prophet. Yubuyashiki. Saint Marcus Mars pointed out the keyword with a single word. Following that, Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn calmly looked at his 4 colleague and said in a deep voice. That's right. Although Kageya Yubuyashiki's ability needs those Hashira he cares about as a medium to be used on the world, both the army headquarters and Cypher Pol have these Hashira. Moreover, to ensure they can enter the other world as soon as possible, they were specifically arranged as advance members. So, as long as Kageya Yubuyashiki actively uses his ability, he will inevitably see future vision of the Hashira in the other world. The only drawback is that he cannot control the time point or the object of the prophecy, which has a certain degree of uncertainty. But for us, no matter what screen feed he sees, it is actually intelligence of considerable value. Saint Topman Warcurry, Saint Shepherd Jupiter, and others nodded frequently. They previously thought that with Mir, they would no longer need other prophets, so they subconsciously overlooked the existence of Kageya Yubuyashiki. Now that Mir refused to provide more future information, it highlighted Kageya Yubuyashiki's advantage. Obedient. Then let's do this. Since it involves future intelligence, the matter of contacting Kageya Yubuyashiki will be handled by your Cypher Pol. Saint Topman Warcurry looked at Saint Shepherd Jupiter, who naturally had no opinion and immediately agreed. However, the Yubuyashiki family's future sight ability consumes a considerable amount of life force. Even though he is healthy now without the curse, he probably can't use it many times a year. Regarding the problem raised by Saint Marcus Mars, Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn coldly provided a solution. Then use the cell reinforcement serum to further enhance his physique, and send over some meat from Sea Kings. Let him eat it after using his ability, to increase the number of predictions as much as possible. Doesn't he also have a son? Give him a tube of serum as well. Their ability is a very important special resource. We shouldn't be stingy in this regard. Also, encourage Kageya Yubuyashiki to have a few more son. Saint Topman Warcurry laughed. Good idea. When the number of men in their family increases, they will be able to see more future vision. In fact, the effect is not much worse than Mir. It's different. Saint Marcus Mars, however, gave a shake head. As the direct superior of the Academy of Science, he was clear on this aspect and immediately gave an explanation. According to the intelligence bestowed by Lord Demu, the future vision Mir sees through the memory of the future host is a result that will definitely happen, while the future vision Kageya Yubuyashiki sees can be changed. Then, as our reaction and actions change, the future outcome will naturally also change. Many accidents will also occur during this process, so his ability mainly serves as a reference. Also, even the future content provided by Mir cannot be blindly trusted, because she can control the memory screen feed seen by Queen Historia. We have no choice but to guard against this.